Welcome to Boone in the Woods and in the Home. I'm so excited because today we're doing something completely different. I'm going to have my very special guest talk about design, and she is an interior designer out of the Chicago area. I actually met her a few years back when we did a DIY boot camp together that Debbie Beard, the owner of DIY Paint, hosted. And I was really taken to her and her design style and her methodology to design, which is totally different from anyone else that you have ever heard of. And I'm hoping that it spreads like wildfire, especially in the Christian community. So there's a lot of people that are interior designers, they have different styles, like I said. She is a Christian, but she is a Christian based designer. And I'm going to say that in a different way. She uses the Bible to come up with the way that she designs. And I love that because we talk about this a lot in Boone in the Woods and in the Home podcast, that everything that we do must be biblically sound, must have biblical principles behind it, when we have to follow the word and do what he says to do. And she does that with design. And I love that. I love that about her. She's an amazing person. I had her do a Christ in Crafting with me a couple of years ago, and that was awesome. And so I knew when we started this podcast that at some point I wanted to bring her in because everybody needs to hear this. I think it will impact everyone. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Thank you again for coming on, and tell us what you're going to be talking about. But first, introduce yourself and the name of your business. I love the name of your business because, again, it is biblically found or structured. So go ahead and explain that.
All right. Yes, I'm Barbara Ann Holmes. I own Lintels and Lallies. It's a space where I practice and teach interior design from a biblical perspective, like Lisa has mentioned here. So lintels and lallies are architectural terms. A lintel is the header that goes over a doorway where you enter a threshold, and a lally column are the columns that you think are ugly and you want to cover them up in the basement. They connect the foundation, the home to the foundation. And it wasn't right away when I got the name. I got the name from an old vintage Hollywood movie with Cary Grant, and it was a comedic scene, and that's what grabbed my attention to it. But then the Lord started to reveal to me that he is the doorway, he's the header. And there's this bridging that's a part of my business where I get to pray intercession over homes, and he is the solid foundation, so I get to help connect the home to the solid foundation. So the name came from him.
Yeah.
And then as he started teaching me more, he blessed me to be aware of the ways that he was teaching and instilling in me. So we have a ministry called Design Magnified. It's completely free. It's on Facebook groups, and there's a workbook, and there's 12 video series that teach interior design start to finish. So we welcome anybody in that.
Yeah, I love Design Magnified. It is so awesome. I mean, you did a great job with it. So
it's all him.
Yeah.
But today I thought it would. Yeah, go ahead.
We'll add that link to the description. So you're listening to this on 103.5 The Light on their local radio station here. Go to my website, boonepodcast.com, and look at the show notes, the description, and the link to her group and her website, her Facebook. All of that is going to be in there.
So today I thought we would go over what design trends are, where they come from, what the new design trends are for 2024,
yes,
and then what you should focus on when it comes to applying trends. Sound good?
Yes, that sounds awesome.
All right. So first off, design trends, where do they come from? They're from the world, right? They come from culture, from TV, movies. It used to be magazines, but we don't do magazines as much now. So that's being replaced by social media. So social media is driving the trends as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we can all play a part in participating in that way. There's something called micro trends, and these are the seasonal ones that you'll find when you go shopping at Target or something. And the reason that they're seasonal is because they want to sell merchandise, right? That's how stores stay afloat. It's a smart business plan. But we can be aware of these things, that they're going to come and go. And part of trends are good in that fact that they train us, who are not the same yesterday, today, and forever like God, that we need to be open to growth and change. So we don't want to keep our homes stagnant all the time. We want to think about our homes seasonally, allowing, even inexpensive ways, changing furniture or repainting something, repurposing things. So there's all kinds of different ways and tools that you can just create space for change change in your home because that keeps our heart soft, I think more pliable to the
Yes.
changes that are us and our family. So from that standpoint, I think trends kind of help us in that to be aware of
Okay.
them, and know the posture that we want to take and how we want to
Yeah.
handle them. There's a mainstream trends, and that's when we tend to think about the decades. Like we can pinpoint the Brady Bunch era with the 70s, with the orange and the avocado green. Like you can kind of look at different decades and figure that out. So it can be as small as a 3 year to a 10-year block when it comes to the mainstream trends. And then we tend to get our new neutrals about every 10 to 15 years. So we hold on to those base colors a little bit longer than everything else. You can probably pinpoint how we had the gray era we just stepped out of, where everything became gray.
Yes.
And it's still lingering a little bit, but we're going to be shifting into something else. So to know where we're going, I think it's important to know where we've been. So I teach in Design Magnified, a really extensive, long 1 hour. If you geek out on this, go check it out. But there's a design timeline throughout the history of mankind. So when we go back and look, a lot of times design will teach us trends beginning in the Stone Age and the Iron and Bronze era, and then going through Egyptian and all of the different things. But we as Christians know that design began in an Eden era. So this kind of creates this Eden longing in us. When we think about Eden, what do we think of, right? We think perfection. God provided every need we needed physically, spiritually, our food, everything we needed, right? And then you look at it from a design standpoint, he had contrast. He had good and evil, the good tree and the bad tree in the middle of the garden. He had trees that were just aesthetically pleasing to the eye. So it's okay to have things that are just beautiful, to take in the beauty of what God gave us to enjoy. Our eyes know what looks good, right?
Yeah.
So there's, all these different things you can just break down from Eden that I know like our function comes from that too. Like he made these plants to reproduce. Everything in his design was perfect. And I think as mankind, we have that longing and we want things to be perfect. So we plug it into different places. So if you study the design timeline, what you'll find is a rebellion, because that's what we bring to the table, right?
Right.
So you're going to see like we start off low and we keep climbing, and then we want opulence. So then it just bursts with all of this beauty of gold and intricate, ornate designs. And then we get tired of that. Our eyes are fatigued. So we're going to just do something different. We're going to take it down and knock it down to the raw bones of wood. And, so you're going to see this bouncing back, and then we get tired of that. So then we want modern, and there's this hamster wheel, and man is just fickle. So we just stay on that hamster wheel. So what's neat about that, knowing where we've been, we can predict what trends are coming, and we can understand and comprehend what trends last. And what you'll find, I find, maybe you will too, but the ones that stand this test of time come from God. They're going to be things like marble and wood and, your natural fibers.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're always striving to try and reinvent the wheel. There's nothing new under the sun.
That's what I was exactly saying. There's nothing new under the sun. And I always say, even when I'm doing creative projects, like, to inspire and encourage people, there's no such thing as perfection. Like only the Father is perfect. Eden was perfect, and we can just achieve for perfection, but we're not going to get there, and it's going to keep us frustrated. So,
So just kind of magnifying a little bit the 2000s, since we're not going to take the time to go through the entire timeline together today. It's fascinating as much as I geek out about it. We're going to start with 2000. So we had, the Tuscan and the European, the heavy Mediterranean furniture. Lots of people were painting red walls. We were with the heavy browns and furniture. So from there, in about 2010, we got tired of that. We wanted something more fresh. So we started doing pops of color with this kind of flat geometric patterns. There were the Greek keys and the chevrons everywhere appearing in the fabrics. And then we also had the transitional coming in, where we had the hand-me-downs from that heavy furniture, but we didn't want to do our whole home in that. So we gave our eyes some rest with the walls being a little bit more neutral, muted. Everything was muted, bringing in the old and then kind of weaving in some of the new. So after that, we start getting this boom with social media, right? Like that's been around for a while, but we get this live stream coming in, and that's just feeding our eyes, and we're participating in it. So much information is coming at us. We have all these tabs open in our brain, in our hearts, on our work screens. So what do we you, we need to rebel against that. And in our homes, we wanted simplicity. So everything started to calm down to almost like a black and white movie. Everything
Mhm.
was black, white, and gray. And the Gaines came in there at that same time period with their
Yeah.
shiplap. So everything was paint it white, paint it white. Let's just have a blank canvas. So all the distraction we see on our screen that's keeping our eyes fatigued and busy, we had restfulness in the homes. So there's always this balance. It's kind of like
Yeah.
playing and turning back and forth with
Yeah.
culture. Really
That
fascinating.
that is interesting because like I read a study, a scientific study one time that our minds were not and our eyes were not designed for social media, for the fast pace of,
Mm.
the what the computer or our tablets or our phones hold, that we are that's is affecting us. It's affecting us greatly and we're learning differently. So we're actually it's hindering our being able to learn and keep that knowledge in our head because we weren't designed to learn that way. So really interesting that, design trends did that just because naturally I think we knew it was too much and we
Mhm.
couldn't cope with that.
Absolutely. So then you get 2020 coming in, and that changed everything in our world, right?
Yes.
A lot of us felt trapped in our four walls, and now we're living with what we created for the first time. So this is a really fascinating perspective where people were getting really fed up and irritated with their homes because they're spending so much time inside. They're
Yeah.
thinking about their homes and their sense of belonging a little bit more. There was this escapism that came in 2020 where everybody was like thinking about vacations and wanting to bring in plant life or anything that they could do to bring in leaves or
Yeah.
something from the outdoors.
Natural. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So again, like the solution that was coming in there, you can always pinpoint the ones that are from God, that are timeless, that we can keep. So now we're coming off of that. And what do we do with this now? So everything was kind of sterile and gray. Well, naturally, we know that our new trend now for 2024 is to warm it all up because we always go opposite on the pendulum. So the best thing that you can do is to kind of have a little foot here and a little foot there, kind of be in the middle of things. When you dive in all the way on something, then it's going to be too much because God doesn't do that in creation, right? There's not
Right.
just sunsets everywhere. We would be really fatigued with a bright sun.
Yeah.
It's
You wouldn't
just
appreciate
in your
it.
face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's, the green grass and there's flowers. He just presents layers and textures. So keeping that in mind. But the new trends of 2024 are to warm things up. That you'll hear words like greige. So you're adding that beige into it. It's not the old beige where there's yellow and orange and brown. It's just a little bit warmer to kind of play off of that. And natural fibers
Yeah.
are coming, lots of textures. So you'll
Yes.
probably find that when you're shopping around a lot.
Yeah.
And I kind of try to predict a little bit ahead of where we're going to be going too. So, in my own words, I call it a revival. Like if you look through the timeline, there's colonial revival, there's different time periods where we have this longing to go back. And I feel like with the move of AI coming in and all this new technology, I think our hearts are going to start to desire what we relate to as feelings of the past. So I think that there's going to be this revival of traditional coming in, handmade items are going to be big, people finding their personality. So the
Mm.
way I approach this as a Christian is to ask yourself the question, does my home tell my story and my testimony? So that's the way that you can kind
That's
of reflect through that. So we can look to the world and say, I like that art piece, but does it speak anything about your family?
yeah.
So go support a local artist that has maybe a Christian piece or something that has a story
Yeah.
or, this is handmade from so and so. Let me tell you about that person and their testimony and
Yes.
how we met. There's so many different
Yeah.
ways you can weave in God into your home.
I think that is so important because there's so much like music, like you don't know the evil behind it unless you kind of research it or you discern
Oh,
and
sure.
hear it. Like you should discern, like, do you need to have a Buddha statue in your house? The answer
Mhm.
would be no.
Right?
Like no, right? But I see it a lot. I see people doing that. I see believers because I'm in an antique store and there's a lot of stuff and this one person brings in a lot of that stuff and I am so opposed to it, but I see people buying it and they claim to be a believer. So
Yeah.
like those are things that you know have to be careful, or just found things. And I even like, and I'm gonna just throw this in there. I of course I buy vintage things. I buy old things and I repurpose them, but I pray over those things. I
Yeah.
pray over that before I bring it into my home, or before, you know, as I'm not going to touch it, especially if I'm going to sell it to someone. Like I pray while I'm painting, you know, even for the family that's going to have it. Like I don't think that people realize that aspect of design, you know, home
For
decor.
sure. And just praying over your home,
Yeah.
in general, room by room, just pray against, because you don't know what's coming in, and having TV on or radio on, there's all kinds of different influences over our children, our
Yes.
family.
The
So
evil
thinking,
behind the agenda. There's always an
mhm,
agenda. Like I said,
yeah,
there's the good and the bad. That's always going to be there because we live in a fallen world, and so you have to
mhm,
take that into consideration. And that's what I love about you and what you're doing is that you're putting him in the center of your business, in the center of your practices, and it's coming through. And I'm actually kind of shocked that you are the pioneer. Not that you are the pioneer, but that no one else has thought about this as a believer. Why hasn't this been at the forefront of their minds, you know? And so I'm so honored to be a part of this, sending this word out to get people to shift their mind, you know?
yeah,
Because he says that you have to renew your
renew.
mind. And so
Mhm,
you're being taught by the world how to do design. So
yeah,
now, how are you going to flip that script to do it for him?
exactly.
I love
And
it.
I think starting on the foundation of knowing and believing, believe it in your heart, man. We've got the word of God telling us that God gave us the dimensions and the colors for curtains in the tabernacle. Do you
Yeah,
not think
he
that
was so
he can tell you?
specific.
Yes, he cares about the details. So I don't buy that, oh, he doesn't care how I paint my walls. No,
Yeah,
he knows every person that's coming through the threshold of your home. He knows every neighbor you're ever going to have. He knows every member in your family, and he knows you better than you know yourself because he built
yeah,
you. So he
yeah,
takes those desires and you release them to him. You release your home and acknowledge that this is not my space, Lord. Have your will and your way. What will you have from my home? And that can look different for each person because he knows the dynamics of your neighborhood. So it's a surrender. Worship is a form of surrender,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
always in that it's bringing something to the altar, right? And
yeah,
a lot of times the elevator homes is me, myself, I. What do I like? What's my design style? We don't leave margin for him. So, and I'm not saying those things are bad. I hope you
yeah.
have beautiful, wonderful things.
Oh, of
The
course.
blessings. We never want to sound condemning, but
No, no, no.
um,
Talk
the
about this.
Lord might work, in different ways with different people. They,
Right.
for you, you might say like, that's an idol. I don't want it in my home. Another
Yeah.
person, it's kind of like the scripture. It says to like about eating meat. It's okay
Oh,
for some, it's not okay for others. So let the Lord be your
yeah.
your gauge and your measure for everything, for sure. Because He doesn't condemn. That's the other thing about the Garden of Eden. There was no shame.
No shame.
So I think He can work you through better than I can teach you or anybody else. But
Yeah.
that's the focal point, is to honor Him and bring Him in the conversation from the get go.
Yeah.
So to down all of these different concepts of design, I've put them into three categories. I call them the umbrellas of design. There's an urban section, there's a traditions section, and there's a casual section. So you can walk through every item in your home and you can say, what category does this fit in? Do I have a good balance of all of these things? So
Mhm.
under the urban, you're going to find modern, contemporary, minimalist, industrial, mid-century modern. So these are all the sleek, kind of colder structural
That.
items, okay,
Mhm.
styles, I should say. And then we go over into traditions, and we've got like Scandinavian, traditional, transitional,
Mhm.
Hollywood, glam, deco, and vintage. So this is kind of in that medium where it's pulling from different things. There's still structure to traditional because we like to flank things on either side of the fireplace. We like something a center focal point. So there's, cleaner lines with the urban traditions. We're still, teetering on that. And then when we get into the casual, it's more free flowing and free form with French country, bohemian, coastal, shabby chic, rustic, farmhouse. There's different names that comes out as this is going to have a little touches of the elegance, lots of layer. You think of the beach when you think of coastal. So
Yeah.
within the categories, how do we bring God into that, right? We can
Yeah.
seek Him. accordingly. So when I think of urban, I tend to think of the sleek mountains and his stones, the bright colors that are in different stones and rocks that he has. So thinking of those as accessories or pops or things that you can pull in with metals, just different ways of layering that. When it comes to traditional, I think of this as the structure, the architecture of like a flower. So you've got the focal point in the middle, and then you've got so many petals. And you can
Yeah.
study, break these things down. Even the architecture of a sunset. Sometimes they're sleeker than others.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
they're, whimsical clouds going on and
Yeah.
brilliant colors. So
Yeah.
if you start kind of like magnifying down and honing in on the items and elements that his hand has made, this is kind of where I see with traditions. And then when it comes to casual, I think of looking at a space as a whole, the feeling and the vibe that it evokes. So if you go to the beach, how does it make you feel? You're going to see the soft colors of the waters, and the sunsets are just a little bit different out there, right? The
Yes.
sandy tones, the textures of the barge wood. So these are feelings and styles that you can evoke into your home. So kind of letting God paint with you, painting with God in his creation, and pulling from each category is going to keep you in that safe zone, no matter what trend we're in, no matter what season.
Yeah.
Got to
Yeah.
have a good balance.
I love that. And I had heard this one guy one time that I knew talk about how if you if you just if you keep your house pretty neutral, and neutral could mean many things. Like I think blue is neutral because you
Yeah.
have the sky, you wear jeans, you can wear any top. I talk about this all the time. Like there's a green, and there's so many greens and trees and all of that. So like if you keep your house pretty neutral, then you can add those pops of color or design things that are inexpensive, and you can still have a timeless house,
Mhm.
and just add those little touches of the new stuff, that you want to do. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I just woke up the other morning and I had to grab a picture of the sunset because it was this blue backdrop with this fiery stripe of the orange that faded up to purple, and but everything is winter where I am in the Midwest.
Yeah.
We have snow, so the backdrop was just white. And it made me think very much of the modern design because it was physically cold, but it visually cold as well. And then
Yeah.
there's fiery pop of color. And everything comes from him if we allow ourselves
Everything.
see it
Yeah.
and speak it.
The last couple of weeks, we've been talking about winter resilience. So I'm originally from New York. I lived
Okay.
in South Carolina for 16 years. I really consider that more homey because I love it there so much. I'd always wanted to move to South Carolina. As a kid, I would think about it. I don't know why. It was just something in me. And then I lived in Alabama for a little bit. Now I'm in Kentucky, which is cold. And and I would find myself saying, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. It's so cold. I don't like it here. And then in the summer it's so extreme. It's the polar opposite. And so really he's been showing me that he designed winter and he designed summer and he designs all the seasons and all the climates, and I have to be grateful in all things. And so we've
Yes.
been talking about winter resilience the last couple of weeks, talking about how you can capture a lot of creativity or different ideas from the scenes that you see. So you described it perfectly, like, like getting inspired by the colors or the textures of, the different landscapes that you see in the winter, and letting that inspire you in your home. So that was a perfect like little
And
thing that you said.
sometimes that happens when we're on vacation. You'll go on vacation, but like this spot feels like home and I don't know why. And you can take a
Oh,
picture. Like I tell people all the time to take photographs and then look back because it's a still shot of a feeling and an emotion. So you can usually pull some colors or textures, something. There's different dimensions that go on. We know we have the physical and we have the spiritual, and they can intersect when we consider
yeah,
him in the process.
yeah,
So just we can look at in design, there's different ways that we can look at things being audio enhancing all of our senses. We can smell something, so we can listen to things in the home, we can smell things. There's a visual textures, but there's physical textures that you can touch. We can do the same things by creating with God and bringing those things into the home with different dynamics. spiritually and physically.
Yeah, I love that. So really quickly, can you touch on what you see happening, the colors that you see happening for 2024?
Sure.
I've gone shopping and I've gone looking and I know what the paint is for 2024 from Sherwin-Williams. And it's what you talked about, the more muted, warmer colors.
Mhm.
But what else do you see? Like, talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think, well, Pantone kind of drives things with fashion a lot, and that's what you're going to see with merchandise. And their big color is Peach Fuzz, I believe is the name of it, but it's in the peach family. So it's happy, it's warm, it's a historical color. So, like I said, we're going to be warming everything up. But as far as adding colors to it, I really believe that we're going to be moving more towards the old traditions. People are going to be wanting colors that make each individual relate to their own story, historically speaking. Like, what time was it grandma's house that had, the cherry furniture? And, I'm just pulling, ideas out there. But if you go back and you explore in your own mind an observance of the different timeline that you have experienced, you'll find things that make you feel like home. So I'm finding that, there's blues are timeless. They're always going to be there. And like you mentioned, greens, the colors that are outside, think colors of the sunset being pops of colors that are coming out. But when we think traditional, we tend to think warm, like creams instead of whites. So there's a lot of that coming in. And not so much with the muted is not what I'm hearing and seeing, but I do think that muted is safe.
Yeah.
Because to mute a color, you're taking a color from the opposite of the color wheel. So that kind of dulls it down. And anytime you can bring something to that medium, then, like I said, a foot here and a foot there in design, you're not committing 100% into something else. But yeah, blue has kind of been on the rise. And I believe that's Sherwin-Williams color. I think it's in the family of blue.
But I saw each line has their own version of it.
They do,
Then of
yeah.
course, blue always complements orange. So
Yes.
they had different blue tones, but they were, I don't know, I guess I would say more shades because to me, they have like more gray, like black and white in there. And so it's not a bright blue, but it was, complementary to that peachy, orangey color. But like those colors look really good. It warms up the space. So.
And when you look back historically in the 80s, we had blue and peach and mauve to a degree.
Yeah.
So it's
being
being
90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just brighter. It was like the teal and the hot pink or the, the orangey like color. Yeah.
It's like when you go shopping for clothes and your kids are wearing things that you wore when you were your age comes back. It's like, no.
Yeah, like nothing new. It just comes back.
There.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just looking at where we've been, where we've come, knowing that it's probably going to be the opposite and trying to keep yourself in the pendulum in the middle is going to be a safe zone. If you're concerned about selling your home is when that's kind of important when you need to appeal to more people. But honestly, I feel like there's this push that's coming to people finding something that's unique to them. And that goes very hand in hand with the biblical alignment of, does my home tell my testimony? When you go on social media, people are taking all of these color tests to see what their colors are that make their skin look better. Do you know what I mean? Like this individualization is really on the forefront of our minds. That is a trend that's coming through social media. So I believe people are going to be more intrigued by what are my colors when it comes to their home. And that can be good. And I just say to have the conversation with God, because we all do have our own. So it's going to be interesting to see, as more people seek the Lord in this process and find no two houses should look the same. No, you can, go to one type of tree or one type of flower, but not all of them in the field are going to be the same. They're all going to be a little bit different. So we are all different parts of the body. Our home should be a reflection of that as well.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for your insight and sharing your belief system. I want to thank you for sharing your faith so boldly, like in your space, in your world. Like, we talk about how we're supposed to be a light in the world, but it's not the whole world. It's our world. It's our influence. And you do that so well. And so just keep on shining your light and leading people, thank you, to the cross. Because, that's what we're supposed to do in everything we do in our work, And so I'm just so proud of you. And so I'm going to send everyone to you. Again, all of the links are in the description of this podcast. If you're listening on the radio, hop on there, boonepodcast.com. Thank you so much for coming on and joining me. And guys, if you are listening, send us your feedback. And if you have a praise report, if you have any questions, go ahead and send it to us on our website. And if they have questions, can I forward them to you and you can answer them?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, thank you guys so much. I hope you have an incredibly blessed day. Ciao.
God bless. Bye-bye.